Her hands trembled as the wedding march began, her heart pounding with excitement. But when the best man turned to face her, everything stopped. "It can't be," she whispered, frozen in place. The happiest day of her life was about to unravel a secret that would change everything forever. The morning of Emily's wedding was as perfect as she had always dreamed it would be. The sun rose early, casting a warm glow over the sprawling countryside estate her family had rented for the occasion. Birds chirped merrily. The air was fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers, and everything seemed to be falling into place that I in her bridal suite. Emily stood before the mirror, the soft lace of her wedding gown cascading around her. Her bridesmaids fluttered around her, adjusting her veil, fixing her makeup, and making sure everything was flawless. But as the clock ticked closer to the ceremony, Emily couldn't shake a peculiar feeling that something significant was about to happen, something she couldn't explain. "Are you nervous?" her best friend and maid of honor, Clara, asked, noticing Emily's distant gaze. "A little," Emily admitted, forcing a smile. "But it's more than that. I can't put my finger on it. It's like something big is about to happen, and I don't know if I'm ready for it." Clara laughed, brushing it off as pre-wedding jitters. "That's normal. You're marrying the love of your life, and everyone's watching. No pressure, right?" Emily nodded, but the feeling lingered. As the ceremony began, Emily's nerves eased slightly. The guests were seated, the music swelled, and the flower girl scattered petals down the aisle. Emily took a deep breath as her father offered his arm to escort her. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he whispered. "James is a lucky man." "Thanks, Dad," Emily replied, smiling through her nervousness as she walked down the aisle, her eyes locked on James, who stood at the altar, beaming with love and anticipation. He looked every bit the dashing groom she had dreamed of marrying. Next to him stood his best man, Daniel, a man Emily had met only briefly during the rehearsal dinner. There had been something familiar about him even then, but in the rush of wedding preparations, she hadn't given it much thought. Now, as Daniel turned to glance at her, something about his face sent a jolt through her. His eyes, his jawline, they triggered a memory buried deep within her. For a brief moment, Emily faltered, her steps slowing. "You okay?" her father whispered, steadying her. "Yes," Emily said quickly, forcing herself to keep walking. But her mind raced. Who was Daniel really? The ceremony went off without a hitch, and soon the guests were seated at the reception. The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and heartfelt toasts. Emily began to relax, thinking perhaps her earlier feelings had been nothing more than nerves. Then came the best man's speech. Daniel stood, holding a glass of champagne, and cleared his throat. "First, I want to thank James for giving me the honor of being his best man. He's been like a brother to me, and I couldn't be happier to see him marrying such an incredible woman." The crowd cheered, and Emily smiled, but there was an undercurrent of tension in Daniel's expression. He hesitated, glancing briefly at Emily before continuing. "But there's something else I need to share," Daniel said, his voice trembling slightly. "Something I never expected to discover when I agreed to be James's best man." The room fell silent. "I grew up adopted," Daniel began. "My birth family has always been a mystery to me. A few months ago, I started searching for answers, and I discovered something that changed my life. I found out I have a sister I've never met. And well," he turned to Emily, his eyes filled with emotion. "That sister is you, Emily." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily's heart stopped. The world seemed to blur as Emily tried to process what Daniel had just said. Memories from her childhood flooded her mind. Stories her parents had told her about a brother they had lost, taken away when they were too young to care for him. She had always wondered what happened to him, but never imagined he would show up on her wedding day. "You're my brother?" Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. Daniel nodded, his own eyes glistening. "I'm sorry for dropping this on you today, but I couldn't keep it to myself. I had to tell you." As the initial shock wore off, Emily and Daniel shared a tearful embrace. Guests watched in stunned silence, some dabbing their eyes with tissues. James, though equally surprised, supported Emily through the emotional whirlwind. The rest of the evening was a blur of emotions as Emily and Daniel pieced together their shared history. Daniel explained how he had been adopted by a loving family, but always felt a longing to know where he came from. When he found records of Emily, he couldn't believe the coincidence that she was engaged to his closest friend. Just when Emily thought the surprises were over, Daniel revealed another shocking detail. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling Emily aside. "I found Mom and Dad too." Emily's breath caught. "What? They're alive? Where are they?" "They've been living in a small town, hoping one day we'd all be reunited," Daniel explained. "They wanted to come today, but I thought it might be too overwhelming. They're waiting to meet us whenever you're ready." The next day, Emily, Daniel, and James traveled to the small town where their parents lived. The reunion was filled with tears, hugs, and emotional conversations as the family finally came together after decades apart. Emily's wedding, which had started as the happiest day of her life, had turned into something far greater, a celebration of love, family, and the incredible power of fate. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. This story is a powerful reminder that love and family are the most precious gifts of all. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments bring us the greatest joy.